All right. Justin Gatlin announced his retirement, Gordon, on his 40th birthday yesterday, released a video on Instagram with an extended statement. And whether you like Justin Gatlin, whether you didn't like Justin Gatlin, you can't deny he's an enormous figure in the sport. He spanned two generations. His gold medal in 2004 at the Olympics was pre when most people outside of Jamaica had heard about Usain Bolt. And then his career extended past Bolt's. That's how long it lasted. I mean, you have a gold in 2004 and then you have a gold in 2017 is pretty remarkable, that amount of time between two gold medals. Obviously, he's going to remember for the doping ban as well. And I remember when he came back from that 4-year ban in 2010, he's running in Estonia, running 10.2s, 10.3s. You're thinking, all right, he doesn't have it anymore. That was it. He's going to do this for another season, and then that'll be the legacy of his career. But it only took another year. It only took till 2011 when he makes the world team in Daegu and came back. And then I remember having a similar sentiment about him, Gordon, in 2015. Do you remember the 2015 season? He was on fire. He was, I'll use the word again, the favorite, actually. And I remember getting a lot of crap at the time from people like, how can you pick against Bolt? And I said, look at the 2015 season. Everything was pointing towards Justin Gatlin winning, and he did not win. Bolt got him, and he got
Bolt
him in the
upset him.
200.
He upset
Bolt
him.
upset him, and I thought it was a legitimate upset, because if you actually watched that season and paid attention and didn't just base your entire opinion on what happened in 2013, in 2012 and 2011, 2009 and 2008, you would think, hey, Gatlin is the favorite. And I thought that would be the end of it for Gatlin. And yet he comes back in 2017 and then finally does pull off the victory over Bolt. Then you go to 2019, gets a silver medal too, which was then 15 years after that '04 gold medal. So just around for a while, a huge figure in the sport, eighth in the trials last year. He never really was clear about because he would get asked about retirement all the time, and I guess it makes sense he decided to hang it up, announce that he was hanging it up on his 40th birthday.
Yeah. Again, incredible career, but obviously controversial career because of the doping
Mm-hmm.
ban. Um, but I do think he was well respected in the sport, like among the other athletes. You talk to a lot of like
Mm-hmm.
the younger athletes, or they're not really younger anymore, they're in their prime, but they all kind of looked up
Yeah.
to Justin. I remember interviewing Trayvon Bromell as a freshman at Baylor, and he would like really he looked up to what Gatlin had done for U.S. sprinting. Obviously
Mm-hmm.
Coleman coming from the same college, Tennessee,
Yep.
as Gatlin. You could just tell that there was a high level of respect from this new generation of sprinters for what Gatlin did in the late 2000s or mid 2010s.
Mm-hmm.
So you may love him or hate him. He had an impact. He had incredible longevity for sprinting, which
Mm-hmm.
typically doesn't happen, right? You don't
Yeah.
really see 15-year span between two medals in a sprinting event. You might see that more in distance, where Kipchoge can win a 1500 and then go on and win a marathon, but not so much in the
Yeah.
sprints. Uh, but yeah, he's going to go down as one of the greatest U.S. sprinters of all time. And yeah, people will put an asterisk on it, but whatever. Barry Bonds deserves to be in the Hall of Fame, in my opinion, right? And people can pretend that Barry Bonds didn't hit 70 home runs in a season, but I saw it happen. I saw Justin Gatlin do what he did. I saw him win in 2017. I saw him have a great 2015 season, and obviously whole longevity. Um, so he's going to go down as he's always going to be remembered, and that's going to be his legacy.
You look at the comments on Instagram too. You talk about the people who came after him, even his contemporaries there. So are heaping praise on him and thanking him for his career. Now, again, there's the other side to that, obviously, and you don't need to ask too many athletes. Like there, people aren't shy about giving their opinion one way or the other on Gatlin, either pro or con. I think there was a sentiment out there that, hey, he sat out for 4 years, did the time for his ban, and then came back. Um, I always thought it was interesting because there was not really a rivalry with Bolt, but a little bit of a back and forth there. But then Bolt like basically put his arm around Gatlin after that last major championship and said to them like to everybody like, hey, like I'm not criticizing this guy. Like he won fair and square. Let's move on because remember there was that really tortured time in it was around 15 and 16 about how Usain Bolt needed to win to preserve the integrity of the sport, which was obviously a completely oversimplification of everything that was going on at the time. But there was a fair amount of people who believed in that, and there was all that animus towards Gatlin. Remember the beer bottle that was thrown at him during the Olympics? I mean, there's a lot of vitriol directed towards him. But I always thought it was interesting that Bolt could have basically said, "Yeah, this isn't fair. Every loss I have to this guy doesn't count." But he went the other direction. He didn't really lose to him that many times either. But in that opportunity, he basically said, "Hey, like, no, I support Gatlin. He won this race. Let's move forward." And I just thought that was noteworthy. Also, one last thing: if 2020 doesn't get canceled, there's a good chance he gets another medal because he was coming
Yeah,
off a silver, and then if Coleman is suspended, like there's a good chance. It's just it seems like between 19 and 21, that's when Father Time really caught up to him, and he couldn't get out of the trials, but made that trials final, which is no small feat. At the age of 39 years old and 15 years after winning your first. At that point, I guess it would have been 17 years after winning your first global gold.
yeah. I think my the number one memory I'm gonna have of Gatlin, like the lasting image I actually am gonna have of him of his whole career. Obviously, a lot of people don't like him, and clearly a lot of people do love him because again, if you look at his Instagram, there are a lot of high level sprinting US stars who are all putting the goat emoji, calling him a legend, thanking him for everything. That's not by
Yeah,
accident. But
yeah.
the one moment I'm going to remember most was in the moment of his like victory in 2017. He spent more time like giving respect to Usain Bolt than he did like taking the mantle himself. Like his
Mhm,
first
mhm.
reaction to beating Usain Bolt was like to bow
And he bowed
down to
out to
him.
him? Yeah, I remember
Yeah.
that. Yeah, yeah,
It's like,
yeah.
can you imagine like um what's like an example? Like who, maybe like LeBron James beating Kevin Durant in an NBA final, or
Mhm.
Kevin Durant beating LeBron James in an NBA final, and Kevin Durant's
Yeah,
first reaction is like much respect to LeBron James. He deserves all
yeah.
the respect. No, they wouldn't. They would be very into their own accomplishment, rightfully so, because it's competition. You're supposed to be happy when you win. But you could tell
Yeah,
that it's always been on his mind. He understands where he stands in the sport, and I think
yeah.
that's something that not a lot of people do. Right? Not a lot of people are gonna take a
That's
moment away
that
from
photo, man.
themselves for. Well, yeah, look at that, man.
Yeah,
This
that pho
looks like Bolt is like knighting him. Like
I think
if he had a sword in his hand, it
I
looks like a
remember.
knight.
Yeah, I remember there was a quote at some point during that time between, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, maybe up through 17, where he said, Gatlin's like, "I'll be Batman, like, I'll be the Dark Knight, whatever." But I think most people don't actually wanna be that. I think most people want to be liked. And I think Gatlin wanted to be liked. And I don't think he was comfortable with being the villain. And that speaks to most people's innate human desire to be liked. We always zero in sports on the people, whether it's football players or boxers or UFC people who play the heel, right? And they really, really get into that. But I think those people are rare, especially when you get outside of combat sports where it's like you're seeing people every single week on the circuit, right? You're appearing before all these fans. Like you want to be liked, you want to be appreciated. And I think that's what we saw more towards the end of his career. Now, Did that mean that like anytime anybody in the media was going to interact with him, it was going to be like this positive interaction? He's like, I'm going to tell you about my whole history and this is what I did wrong. No, there was definitely some prickly interactions, but I think in general he wanted to be liked because I think most people wanted to be liked. So I don't think he wanted to have any feud with Usain Bolt, and that's why he did what he did there. I think he understood how great Bolt was, and I think he had some self-awareness too of that moment of, man, I just beat the beloved character and people's feelings of me are mixed at best. Anyway,
Yeah,
crazy career,
it's like
crazy career.
it's a yeah, crazy career and memorable, and that's all it's gonna be. It's gonna be memorable.
Yeah.
That's the end of the day. You can't erase the memories. So
Mhm.
hey, man,
Yeah.
you can
Well, I think the one
if you want to go the next 50 years of your life angry that Justin Gatlin got to continue running after a 4-year ban. Uh, have fun with that.
yeah.
Maybe just
Well,
go outside, man, and live a little.
Well, my thing at the time when he came back, and then it was like, all right, well, he's allowed to come back. They can't block him from meets. And then that evolved into, oh man, he's getting good now, though. He's going to start making teams and then he's going to win medals. And then, hey, he's a candidate for athlete of the year. How long can you go pretending he doesn't exist? Because when you let him back in, if they're allowed to compete, you have to consider them for all the awards and all the trappings that come with being a professional track and field athlete. But obviously, there was a lot of resistance to that. And there's a difference between saying, well, I'm not going to cheer for him, which is fine. If you're a fan, totally within your right, cheer for whoever you want. And, oh, he's not allowed to get this medal or he's not allowed to get these awards or, hey, you're rewarding bad behavior. I get people for having that sentiment, but from a USATF perspective, from a IAAF World Athletics perspective, it puts them in a tough spot because it's like, hey, this person is allowed to compete. We can't just pretend that in lane 3 there's nobody there or that person who won that race isn't there. So it put track in a very tricky position for many years because highest profile event, high profile figure from one of the biggest track country out there just in terms of total participation and amount of medals. And then you have to do this delicate dance around it. I think Gatlin, the great what if here would have been if when he came back in 2010 or at any point between this run, if he just said, hey, here's what happened, here's what went wrong, yeah, I apologize, blah, blah, blah. But the story, he didn't really want to get into it. The story was, the sabotage and all that other stuff. And I think for people, they had a hard time, moving past it because they wanted the full throated apology. Now, some people still would have held out. Um,
Yeah,
and then there was a lot of, and on one side, what I take Gatlin's side clearly is he was always referred to as this like he's a two-time drug cheat. But if you look at what his ban was for the first time, right? It was for a medication that was provided in college, right? Like that whole thing got like wrapped up and packaged into this big, large thing. The second one, yeah, obviously 4-year ban, but just the repeated statements about two-time drug cheat, this and that, and then even with the good versus evil and him versus Bolt, everything just got way blown out of proportion and way larger than life. And then you could see why someone would, naturally dig in their heels. But I could also see why someone's like, hey, I just don't want to. I don't want to cheer for this person. There's plenty of other people to cheer for. I'm not going to cheer for this person.
yeah. I wanted him to win in 2015 because I think it's wrong for people to kind of use a person, in this case him, as like their vehicle for virtue signaling. And I thought it was like, what are you doing with it? Like you're not solving the problem. So turning Justin Gatlin into a villain doesn't solve drug problem in our sport. It's not like,
Mhm.
well, we can bully him out of the sport and therefore there'll never be drugs in our sport ever again. No, that's not how it
Yeah.
works. I don't think people are going to be like, they were mean to Justin Gatlin. I don't know if I'm going to ever do drugs. No, do you think someone's thinking about
Well,
that? No, they're not thinking about that at all. So it was a
well, the
way for you to
dumbest
feel good
thing.
about yourself by being like, I am better than Justin Gatlin because I said he did bad. Like, cool,
Well, I looked
congrats.
at it from a different perspective. The perspective I looked at it from was it's a race. If Gatlin beats him, the sun will come up tomorrow. Track will exist.
Yeah.
It's not going to end the world. Like people thought track would come to an end in 2015 if Gatlin beat Bolt. And then ironically enough, 2 years later, it actually happens. And we're still here talking about track. Track did not end. Everybody was fine. Now you can say, hey, the guy I wanted to win didn't win, or oh, hey, it sent a bad message. But hey, man, over the last 2 decades, 3 decades in track and field, there's been a lot of bad news in track and field, but it's not
Yeah.
enough to completely derail the sport. And you're right, it's not just about one guy. There's all sorts of other stuff going on. I mean, you see it with the Winter Olympics even right now with doping and to boil it down just to this one person versus this one person, and Bolt is going to single-handedly save the sport by winning this race. I just thought, hey, that's a little overwrought for me. But let's move on. Let's move on.
Let's move on.
Uh,